Hello and welcome to Global Methodist Voices. My name is Justin Arnold. I'm excited to be with you for another episode. If this is your first time ever listening to Global Methodist Voices, I do want to give you an update. We have like 40 or 50 other episodes that you could go check out. The most recent one was super fun. It was a recording from the streets of our annual conference where I just randomly stuck a microphone into unsuspecting people's faces and asked them questions, some very serious and most of them very not. So it's just over an hour, and you can see faces from all over. If you're a layperson, you may see your pastor on there. If you're a pastor, you may see your lay people on there. So it'd be a good one to go check out and see how it's going. My name is Justin. Like I said, I'm a pastor here in the North Georgia Global Methodist Church. I serve at Red Wine Methodist Church in Gainesville, Georgia. And so that's who I am. I like long walks on the beach and other things that you say in these times. But yeah, I'm excited today. Our guest is one of I think we've had one or two other authors, but we have pastor, professor, and author, Dr. Rich Griffith. He is pastor up in Lula, professor up at University of Toccoa Falls or Toccoa Falls University. Y'all just changed, so you're going to have to correct me on that, Dr. Griffith.
Right.
But welcome to Global Methodist Voice Podcast.
Thank you so much, Justin. I'm so glad to be a part. Yes, it is a recent change as of October. I don't know what I'm thinking. I got thrown off on your walks on the beaches. I was picturing it. July 1st is when we changed over to University of Toccoa Falls, which basically highlights we have a bunch of master's programs. And then also we become an institution for a lot of research too.
Awesome. So get us started kind of who you are, how you kind of got into A, ministry, and B, professoring.
Yeah, so that's an interesting call. As far as ministry first, I was not raised in a practicing Christian home. Became a Christian, long story short, through some friends who introduced me to Christ in middle school. I grew in that faith, started reading the Bible, read other things too, like the Quran, the Bhagavad Gita. I'm like, well, the Bible's the only one that really makes sense, right? And started going to church. Matter of fact, I first gave my life to the Lord at a United Methodist Church in Maryland, where I was born and raised, and then felt the call to student ministry at 17. Was doing that in the military for a bit, then with Young Life, and then started getting into the UMC, United Methodist Church, in Sugar Hill, actually. And was at that church for like 13 years and just progressed. And basically, I went and got my master's at Fuller Theological Seminary because I knew they had a doctorate in youth, family, and culture, which kind of brings us to this whole conversation as to. And I have 3 adopted sons. I'm a single guy who felt that call and fought it for 4 years. Share your story sometime you get a chance. I hope you get a chance to share that too. And that really introduced me a lot into family systems and culture and theology. And my kids came out of the system, so there was a lot of trauma. So I just recently became a certified practitioner in TBRI, which is trust-based relational intervention, because man, our culture is doing a lot of damage to kids. I used to say our culture is doing a lot of damage to young people, but honestly, our culture is doing unique damage to every age segment. And it's because we're so segregated and disjointed and cultural dysfunction and just all kind of things. So yeah, so basically back in 2016, I was doing a part-time pastoral ministry that had a parsonage, but I was running out of money and wound up. I was going to go just to see about doing an adjunct professor position at the time Toccoa Falls College, and they, Lord's providence, they said, "Well, we're actually looking for a professor of youth ministry." And I'd been doing that for a long, long time, and both church and parachurch, and then had my doctorate in youth, family, and culture. And they wound up hiring me, and I wound up beating out a really famous youth person for that job. I like to brag about it, but I won't say the name. And the only reason I beat that person is because the college would not be able to accommodate their travel schedule for all the speaking. So this is how I wound up at Tacoma Falls College. I was sort of like second or third or fourth best. I don't know.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's it. That's it. That's kind of the nutshell in ministry, and the Lord's blessed throughout time. Probably, I've been in the North Georgia Conference since 1994, and so I know we all share a lot of similar acquaintances in our
I'm sure.
our ministry relationships there.
Right, and you're serving up, just are y'all in Hall County or just north of Hall County?
Yeah, we're
You
in
are
Hall
in,
County.
up in Lula.
I jokingly say the thriving metropolis of Lula. It's a great congregation, though. They're wonderful people, and it is a church where we sort of practice this church as family concept that we're kind of hopefully maybe get into in just a little bit.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well,
Yeah,
that takes me to kind of, your heart in this season of life has
sure.
been, you mentioned that you have kind of in the world view, a non-traditional family.
Yeah,
Single guy, some
yeah,
adoptive kids,
yeah,
and, which doesn't match the mom and dad plus 2.5, as you said when
right.
we first were meeting, as kinda like the I don't know, was that the Mayberry family or,
Yeah, the nuclear family. Yeah,
whatever that is, and
yeah,
so, you have written on and researched about and really dove into this idea of church as family, so, will you kinda walk us through I've started reading the book, the idea of, church as family.
right. Right. Yeah, I'll do that. What happened? It was an interesting conversation. I love working with and equipping churches, and I kind of do that on top of the things that I do. And I'm part of an organization called D6 Family Ministry. I don't know if you've ever heard of them or not, but you can go to d6family.com, and they're also a publishing house, Randall House Publishing. And I was speaking at a conference, and the guy who actually founded the organization, Dr. Ron Hunter Jr., we have some social capital with each other and trust each other. And basically, he pulled myself and a buddy over who's actually was in my doctoral cohort, Dr. J.J. Jones, who has a church in Tennessee. And he said, "Hey," Ron says, "Hey, I'm about to give this message on how do you define family ministry?" And Justin, you're probably familiar with this. Like, if you get 10 family ministry practitioners in a space and you say, how do you define family ministry? You'll get at least 8 different definitions. One or two might agree on it, right? And then he was going through his presentation, and usually family ministry is defined as the way we've segregated the church is defined by age and stage, right? And it's typically going further. For years, it was defined as, birth through maybe 5th grade. And so I always had a problem with that because I'm like, well, so then what happens? Your kid gets in middle school and high school and they're no longer part of a family, right? There's no family ministry there. So the problem with the age and stage, and then when you talk about how our ministries have become so segregated, the problem is we weren't defining family ministry theologically. And so even in that presentation, we were talking to Dr. Ron and we said, well, the one definition we're missing is a theological definition. So the start of this catapult of, the research statistics, you're already familiar with this. This has been out for a while. It changes a little bit, it fluctuates, but it says that 75% of young people who grew up in the church, in family ministry or church ministry, youth ministry, 75% of those young people walk away from their faith. Now, if you and I only did 25% of our job well, how long would we have our job? Right. And so this is a problem. We're wrestling with, well, again, there's too much segregation, not enough rites of passage. In other words, when you really boil it down, I'm going to give you a short synopsis of this. When you boil it down, we don't treat each other like family. And ironically, how many churches you've been to where they call each other brother and sister, but we don't treat each other like it. And then you add on the fact that the non-traditional family, or what's called permeable family, is almost at the same number exactly of traditional nuclear families in America. So not only are we segregated and young people who grew up in the church are leaving the church for a number of reasons, but then also we have the issue of we spent all this money We've been targeting nuclear families. What about my kids, for instance? What about my kids who are in a single parent home and they don't meet the nuclear family model? And what happens is most pastors, we do ministry out of our empathy, what we can relate to, right? But if you've never been a grandparent pastor who's raising your grandchildren, or you've never been a single parent, or you've never been an adoptive parent, you just don't know, right? And so we program toward what we know. Now, I don't want to bore you, and if I'm talking too much, just feel free to cut me off and ask questions or whatever. So the research that has gone into this, um, Dr. Chap Clark at Fuller, when he was there, he coined the phrase systemic abandonment. Systemic meaning non-intentional, but abandonment. And this actually started happening in the 1980s with like latchkey kids and all this other stuff. Then you get the zero tolerance because of public school shootings in the 1990s. And so systemic abandonment means they're not doing it intentionally, but all the institutions and organizations that are supposed to be about the healthy nurturing and care of young people have been hijacked by adult driven agendas. Now, so my question was, if we're not challenging this in culture, let alone even in the church, what's going to happen next? Justin, I don't know if you know this or not, but what this has led to is that the United States has the highest rate of incarcerated juveniles than any other industrialized nation in the world, including Russia and China. Now, that's a problem, right? And then we have our elders. And listen, I love it that churches say things like, well, we want to draw in young families. Well, put yourself in the shoes of a 60-year-old or a 50-year-old who has been the blood, sweat, and tears of that church. And now you're all of a sudden saying, without clarity, you're saying, well, we want to attract younger families. Well, all of a sudden, the people who are the legacy people are going, okay, then what's my role anymore?
Mm.
Now, again, you wouldn't ask that question if you were in an intentional intergenerational church as family model, because everybody has a space in place.
Right.
So this is a mess. What it's created is a culture of dysfunction where, because of the segregation, even in the church, we've created an environment of increasing ephebophobia and gerontophobia. Ephebophobia being the fear of the young, and gerontophobia being a fear of the old. Well, why do we fear each other? Well, we know in human psychology, we only fear what we don't know. Well, why don't we know each other? Because we're too segregated.
Yeah.
So there's this big, big, big study that I could go on. I mean, I'm giving you the tip of the iceberg of everything that's going on. But I'm sure as a pastor, you've seen this, and it probably resonates with your heart of going, man, how do we? And we're not saying do away with affinity ministries. We know that you have to teach age and stage some. The problem is we got to get away from so many programs and build relationships, intergenerational relationship. And we also have to start thinking about families that are not are just a traditional mom, dad, 2.5 kids. And we
Right.
need to be intentional about more intentional intergenerational ministry. Sorry, so I just went bleh and put a lot
Yeah.
out.
No,
I'd
it's
love to hear
good.
your thoughts.
No, I love it. The first thing that jumps out is really that theology of the family. And the
Yeah.
first thing that hopped out to me is when Jesus is, talking, and they're like, your mom and
Yes.
they're looking for you. They're
Yeah.
your family. And he says, no, these people are my family.
Yeah. Who
Those
are
who
my mother,
do my
brothers, and sisters?
will. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. And
Those who
so
do my
this,
will are my family. And so,
yeah.
um,
And
and
and this,
Jesus kind of redefines the familial relationship. I can think of like Jesus on the cross when he's hanging there and he looks down at his mother and James and he says, "Mom, this is your son. Son, this is your mom. Like, go take care of her."
yeah.
Like the there's the nuclear family is amazing, and there
Right.
is decades and decades of awesomeness, and we love
Sure.
it, right?
Right. Right.
And at the same time, theologically, the family of God has to be larger than that.
Yeah, and it's funny because when you're looking at the situation with Mary and John, the fact of the matter is, I don't think John ever considered being, Mary's new son, right?
Right.
But and so you hit the nail on the head. Is sort of this thing about it's this theological definition of family, and I think what this does. So you go back to the nuclear family. Look, I don't know what home you were grew up in. I grew up in a nuclear family. Like we were missing a half kid, but it was me and my brother and my mother and father, right? But first of all, people don't realize this. I hate to say this. The church has idolized the nuclear family and idolized marriage and idolized all these things. But the nuclear family is actually a post World War II construct, right? Post World War II. So it's not even 100 years old, but we've idolized it. Here's the other thing: how many families in a nuclear family grew up where dad ruled with an iron fist, maybe was an alcoholic, you had one or two alcoholic parents. And here's the key, and this is fascinating when you do a historical sociological study, as family systems have shrunk, so have the support systems.
Mm.
So think about this: when we were in an agrarian culture, you had everybody pretty much was not as mobile. They lived on the farm or lived in wherever. I mean, suburbs, even the suburbs were a post World War II construct. You had country or you had city. There wasn't anything really in between, right? So then you moved away from the farm, you moved away from grandma, grandpa, aunts, uncles, family support system, church, right? The church and the community. So what happened is we went to the suburbs. We started doing the mom, dad, 2.5 kids. Families became smaller. We were away from parents or grandparents, aunts, uncles. We stopped. Look at our culture today. How many times do families get together in their extended family? Right? So then you get to the single mom model, and the family support systems are even less because of whatever reason, shame, baggage, whatever, lower amount of income for single moms. And they're just struggling. And all the while, it's almost like the church has these blinders on,
Yeah.
thinking we're still living in the mom, dad 2.5 suburban thing, and we're not there anymore.
Right. Right.
And so what this is doing, and again, it's I would keep using this word systemic. It's not intentional. The problem is we're just not being intentional enough to think about the circumstances we're comfortable with and we have empathy with. And in the meantime, we're losing so many people, and we're wondering why the churches are shrinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, another mouthful, right?
Yeah, no, no. So I think the other thing that comes to mind, and I've been lucky to serve in really excellent churches and attend really excellent churches most of my life.
Right.
And, you know, my wife and I felt a call to move to Minnesota. And so we packed up all of our stuff and we moved 1,000 miles away from home, which is Marietta, Georgia to me. And
Go into the cold.
the, we moved there January 13th of 2017. It was negative 12 degrees when we parked our car, and
Oh
we did
man.
not know what we were doing. Um, and I say that we got there January 12th. January 13th, we found out that we were expecting our first kid, and
Wow.
we had just moved 1,000 miles away the day before from our entire support structure.
Right. Right.
And one of the things we ended up landing through a lot of God stories way longer than we have here,
Uh,
but we ended up landing at a church that really had all the ages present in it.
awesome. Yeah.
And right when our son was born, we actually started a small group. We called them life groups or something like that.
Mhm.
But we started one, and it was called Next Chapter,
Yeah.
and it was all people that were in a new phase of season of life. And it was
Right.
people that had just become empty nesters
Yeah.
mixing with people who had
Wow.
just become first time parents.
Yeah.
Um, and so like we would show up to small group and we would pass our kid to a person who's raised godly kids,
Yeah.
and we would say, "Here's our baby."
Yeah.
And they were, like, in tears, right? Because 'Cause they've just sent their kids out into the big scary world.
Right.
They've raised them, and they've had to let them go, and then they got to spend time like, we wouldn't see our kid. We were in the same house. We wouldn't see our kid for 2 hours,
Wow.
and
Yeah.
the only time would be like, "Hey, he needs a bottle or a diaper."
Right.
And
Right.
otherwise, they took care of the kids, and they
Yeah.
became like grandparents in our lives. And so,
Yeah.
my parents were 1,000 miles away. My wife's parents were like 2,000 miles away.
Wow.
And, uh, but we walked in and we handed our child to basically grandparents. Like in
Yeah.
the biblical world, I think they were grandparents, right?
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
at the church I serve, there are 60, 70, 80-year olds
Right.
that my 6 and 8-year old run up to, and they'll treat them as though they are grandparents.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And, it's those people in church, they'll come to my kids' games
Right.
and, like, see them at their sporting events, and they'll
Yeah.
write them notes of encouragement and all sorts of stuff. And so, yeah, for us, I think I've been uniquely blessed to see church do the family thing pretty well,
Right.
even
Right.
for, we've got a we've got a single mom that goes to our church that is a foster parent for medically
Yeah.
frail kids,
Oh man.
and those medically frail kids have changed the heart of our church. But
Yeah.
on Sunday mornings, we have 2 of them, and they both use oxygen, or one of them's on a ventilator, and, they park them in the back of the sanctuary. Now we could say, they're too loud. They can't
No.
be in here. They need to go to the nursery where all their machines won't make noise.
Right.
No, people go and wait for those babies to get there on Sunday
Yep.
morning, and they are held and cared for the entire
Yep.
service.
Yep. Amen.
If those people don't stand and sing or give or hear one bit of preaching, but they love those little kids, they've done exactly what I think they're supposed to do that Sunday.
Yeah.
So, like,
Yeah. That's
Red Wine
ministry.
for us has been such a blessing because we're seeing,
Right.
if we've looked at our kids here, most of the kids that come to my church come with grandparents
Yeah.
uh so their parents aren't necessarily coming to church, but their grandparents bring them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
For
we've
sure.
um and at the same time, I know we've been in places where everything was siloed. We didn't know the person sitting on the same pew as us,
Right.
and it's been different. So I love this idea of church as family. I love like actually walking into uh the struggles of the relationship as church as family, because
Yeah.
when it gets messy.
It does, but it's such a blessing. Look, my kids came with all kind of trauma, and it was messy, right? But it's made me a better person. It's deepened my theology. It's deepened my walk with God. Here's an interesting thing too. So we just is reimagining churches family came out. Gosh, probably in I think January. We're actually launching a second volume. I want to talk about so reimagining churches family volume one redefines family, the need for family theologically, and then we talk about grandparenting, right? So Larry Fowler, who is the founder of Legacy Coalition, which again, if you have grandparents in your church, and this is the shocker for me, I wasn't thinking about grandparents. I was thinking grandparents like 60s, whatever, right? They're 40s and 50s, right? And they're still very vibrant. So Larry Fowler, Legacy Coalition, he wrote the chapter on grandparenting. Shelley Melia out at DBU, she wrote it on single parents. I wrote the one on foster adoptive. Again, we celebrate nuclear family. It's a chapter in there because we're talking about, well, how do all these family models come together to be church as family? But here's an interesting factor. So we talk about how the primary task of adolescence is identity formation. And I believe that. I know that. And because that's the first time they're identifying, having a sense of self apart from family stuff. Here's what the epiphany that hit me that I just realized is, and you hit the nail on the head with this, where actually, that's probably only one of many identity formation processes going on. It is the first one, but here's what I mean by that. So, empty nester, man, that's a whole new identity, right? Your world was revolved around your kids and sports and all the other things you were doing and stuff. Then you get to be a grandparent, your identity changes again. Then you retire, right? And all your identity that was in what you did changes. And I think there are these seasons that we don't look at the identity formation of our changes. And here's why it's important. So your grandparent types at your church who now are probably separated from their family from distance or whatever, and maybe they talk to their grandkids. They get together once, twice a year, but it's like this over the internet or whatever, and they miss having their children or grandchildren. So that identity formation. So how many older people in the church say, well, what's my purpose now? What's my identity? Right. Well, now you've just given them an opportunity to be in ministry. And now they're like, it's a ministry they probably never considered before, but it fits their emotional and their life needs now. Why we've gotten rid of this concept. I mean, I don't know. It really has been. So here's the way I put it: the church has been a victim of their own success, and what I mean by that is youth ministry really started out of the 1800s and really found its heyday in the 1940s with parachurch ministries where you got Youth for Christ, Campus Crusade, Young Life, all these folks. Billy Graham came out of that period of time, right? Then churches said, oh, we can do this. We need to have something for our youth, which again, because of developmental sciences and how the brain works and all this, yes, we needed affinity ministry. The problem is we segregated so much, we professionalized so much, everything became a program. And the problem is now we're victims of our own success. And now we're not changing. I can't tell you the number of job descriptions I get for people looking to hire because I'm a professor of youth ministry at the university. And the number of job descriptions that come in, and I'm like, they're still not getting it. They're not understanding that they're doing a job so they're looking for the superstar young youth worker, right? Because they can pay them cheap and stuff. And don't get me wrong, it's a good gig. But most churches can either afford to hire energy or experience, not both. Well, this is where you have to pull your grandparents in to be a part of this ministry too, so that they get some wisdom. Listen, I'll be honest with you. I was 17, 18-year-olds doing youth ministry in the military. I did stupid stuff. I did dumb things in my early 20s and stuff, but by the grace of God, right? But now I love partnering with younger people doing youth ministry because I've been a dad. I'm a grandparent age now. I hate to admit that. But the beauty of it is I think the church can help overcome the dysfunction, the separation. We know everybody's looking for identity. Everybody's looking for belonging. Everybody's looking for purpose. And I think the church is the one organization to counter all the dysfunction in our culture. We got to teach every generation, put your phones down and be in relationship with each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm starting to get preachy
Yeah.
now.
No. We need it. No, I was thinking, because of my non-traditional family that I've acquired over the last couple of years. Yeah, I'm not far from being a grandparent. And
Yeah.
so, well, depending on if, my oldest kid ever goes on a date or not, but I'm not far from being a grandparent.
Right.
So who
At least
knows?
grandparent age.
Yeah, I could be, and I'm 35, about to be 36 this year. So,
At least okay.
yeah, so who knows? We'll see what God has in store for that. But, no, I really, I really do think, so I'm very fortunate. So my grandparents are on my dad's side are still married, still alive,
Yeah.
and they're in their
Yeah.
early 80s. My parents are still married. And so it's like nuclear family to nuclear family to nuclear
Right.
family. Right. So
Right.
I think it's generational to some
Yeah.
extent.
But our churches
And
aren't like that anymore.
right. But for me personally, this
Sure.
is,
Personally, sure.
and my grandma always talks about like nursery ministry.
Yeah.
We've made it so big, but it used to be the old ladies in the rocking chair holding babies.
That's right.
And,
Right.
and that was part of
Mm.
that, like you were talking about, that met a need for them because they felt like their bodies couldn't do anything else,
Right.
but they could sit in there and one young person could just hand them a baby
Yep.
and they could rock for an
Hold that
hour.
baby. Yeah.
And, I see it now. My grandma, this is a side. This has nothing to do with the podcast, but I love
Good.
my grandma and it's
Yeah.
a good story. She went into a chiropractor office to get an adjustment about a year ago.
Uh-huh.
And, a woman was in there and her baby was crying and the woman just looked exhausted. She had taken everything she had. Lady's like, this baby hadn't slept. I hadn't slept. All she's done is cry. She may have colic. She may have whatever, blah, 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 blah. I'm at my wit's end. Can you please just crack my back so I can go? Well, my grandma happened to be in the waiting room listening to this woman tell the chiropractor that. And she was like, well, take the baby out of the car seat and I'll stay here after my appointment and I'll hold your baby for a minute and I'll get him to stop crying.
Yeah.
And the mom looked with big eyes and she was like, I'm not giving this strange old lady my baby.
Yeah.
And the chiropractor goes, she's the sweetest old lady you've ever met. Give her the baby.
Right.
So the woman came, she pulled the baby out, handed it to my grandma. My grandma sits in the waiting room in just one of the waiting room chairs. And the lady gets her chiropractic adjustment or whatever. And she comes back and there's tears coming down her face. And she said, My grandma's like, "What's wrong?" She goes, "That's the first time my baby stopped crying in a week."
Yeah.
Because my grandma has the grandma touch
Right.
and doing everything safe. She can hold and she
Right.
sings hymns.
Right.
She holds, she rocks, and she sings hymns until babies fall asleep, and they do it
Sure.
every single time.
Yeah.
Man, if that happened more in our churches,
Right. Listen, brother, I'm gonna tell you something. Here's the reality of it, and I hate to say this. I see the nefarious, unintentional side too, right? So, for instance, here what I mean by that. Because our generations are so segregated, and now you even got this thing where children are disowning their parents, right? Because their parents weren't perfect and all this stuff. It's like, it's driving me crazy, right? But the fact that this lady was keeping her child in a car seat, was not holding the baby and nurturing. Listen, we have a culture. You want to know why the culture is getting so screwed up? Sorry to use that word, but the fact of the matter is we're not connecting intergenerationally. So the grandmas who have raised babies and know how to do this are providing the nurturing that some of the parents don't know how to give because it's never been modeled.
yeah, yeah,
And it's a big listen, when I talk about this, I'm not talking about cute church programs or I'm talking about a cultural malaise that is a real issue that if we don't stop it, everything from criminalization to kids to children who don't know how to nurture or be nurtured, I'm thinking the church is the only place that is going to turn this around. And we can become a model once again to society to say, let us show you what you don't know.
right,
Sorry,
right.
again, I'm getting preachy. It's such a deep, deep issue. Most of it go about our lives just kind of so blind and oblivious. We sit there and go, oh, why is everything so messed up? If we just sat down for a little bit and looked, we would know.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's it's fun to, um it's fun to see. Is there any, going back, we've talked kind of like the macro level, there's a
Sure.
problem,
Right.
right? And we've talked about that, part of the problem is definitional.
Right.
So definitionally, we've said family means this.
Right.
Culturally, family does not mean that anymore,
Right.
and theologically, family probably never meant that.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so there's that. Um, is is there anything that has been, out of your research or seeing people bring into practice this
Mhm.
more theologically correct, holistic practice of family? Have you seen changes in churches and lives and people,
Yeah.
as they've
Yeah.
kind of walked through?
Yeah, absolutely. There are actually ministry things too. And what I love doing too, by the way, is I love connecting people and organizations with each other. So I'm going to mention a couple here real quick, right? There's Generation Spark. They're actually based out of Canada, but they work in the USA too. So again, I think you can go to generationspark.com and they will teach churches how to re-engage intergenerationally, things like that. There's another ministry I serve on their board called Intergenerate, and they actually have written books and they're doing things about how do you take intergenerational ministry and be intentional with it. Now I have to say this too, I love going and working with churches, giving them resources and things like this, but here's a lot of people will say, well, how do you do this? How do you do specific like intergenerational program, right? We're so program driven that we go all the way to a program right away. And I'm like, look, I can talk to you about principles and why they need to happen, but my church is different than your church, right? How a mega church interacts with intentional intergenerational ministry is different than the church in Lula. It's actually a little bit easier to do in the church of Lula, but even in a larger church like a mega church, right? Here's a couple things you can do, just ideas, right? All I can do is give ideas. I give the principles that are solid, but then I give ideas. Like for instance, instead of every year churches struggling financially because they send their children to a camp, they send their youth to a camp, dads go to a camp, moms go to camp. Why not one year as you start building this mentality of church as family and intergenerational? Why not say, you know what, this year we're going to do an intentional church as family camp and we're going to all go together. And listen, brother, I'm going to tell you, I've done family camps and parents and grandparents, people have been doing these things. They will ask the kid, what do you want to do for vacation this year? And they'll say, we want to go to family camp. You
Yep.
know why? Because they're all together. The kids run around, they play, they have fun, they do some affinity thing, interaction, but everybody's watching out for everybody's kids. right? And that's something we've lost in our culture. This is why the mom wouldn't give the baby to your grandma, right? We've
Yeah.
lost that intergenerational connection, and it's fear. So family, church, and I'm very careful to not call it family camp anymore because again, people have mom, dad, 2.5 kids in their head. And what I want to say is church as family. So what about small groups or your grow groups? I think you call them life groups, right? Like you did. Why not? Okay, great. Have a season for affinity small groups. Married couples go here, whatever, right? But then have another season where it's intentionally intergenerational. Build those relationships. I'll tell you the beauty of how this works out too. So let's talk about the single person in your church. The next book we're actually writing on another group. Next book is going to discuss the sociological reasons and then talk about different age groups or groups that are left out too. So let's talk about young adults, might be single. And I can relate this to a single person. Like, so if there's a couple in my church that they're frazzled, right? You use that word exhausted. How many parents are exhausted in our culture, right? But let's say you had a single person that you trust, been through background checks and stuff like that. What if you got a couple of groups of single people together and, you had a night where, you know what, the single group are going to do something with some of your youth and you're going to provide childcare, like a fun event out for the kids so that moms and dads can go out and have a date night. Here's where the trade-off comes in. So as a single person, when I get sick, who takes care of me? Right? Nobody, if they don't know, right? But here's the thing. If you have intergenerational intentional small groups every now and then where they build a community, so when the single person is sick, the married couples or the grandmas can say, "Oh, I want to bring them over some chicken soup. I want to try what are your needs?" They get nurtured and taken care of that way, right? And then when the single parents, the single folk can help with childcare, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's just you have to be creative with your context with intentional thinking. So again, intergenerational intentional small groups occasionally. And the great thing about it is, you know this as a pastor, you don't say this is our new direction. We're going to do this and it's a cement. What if it fails, right? But the point being is you say, hey, this is seasonal. We're going to experiment. We're going to have fun. We're going to put all the safeguards in place and stuff like that. But we just got to ask the question, how are we intentionally going to engage in this ministry? And I love there's a theologian who I've quoted him before. He says, Jesus ate his way through the gospels. And it's so true, right? And so, what if on a Sunday morning, instead of your typical worship, you did a Sunday morning brunch where it's everybody together and it's brunch, but it's your Sunday school and worship combined together and you have it in your fellowship hall.
Yeah.
Wow. Why not? Right? Why do we have to keep saying church has to look like this?
Yeah. No, and one of the other things we did intergenerationally too for if anybody wants it, it was our children's director here has been incredible, and we have a children's director. But she's had where the kids lead things.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
for right before Easter, we had we called it a Jerusalem lunch, I believe, or something like that. And the kids
Yeah.
prepared the food,
Yeah.
obviously with food safety and all that stuff, you know.
Right.
But the kids prepared the food. They told the story of what you were eating and why you were eating. They
Right.
dressed up and did the whole thing, but they were in charge of lunch. Normally, the adults are in
Right.
charge of lunch and the kids have the kids table, and then the
Right.
kids, they're kind of separate, and they'll eat the plate of fruit and as much candy as they can get their hands on,
Right.
but the kids told the story of we didn't do a full Passover meal because nobody was
Sure.
going to eat
Right.
horseradish and chew on chicken bones, not to be irreverent towards that, but
I get it.
we
Yeah.
weren't gonna get our kids to lead that, right? But
Right.
we
Right.
could get them to lead in, grilled chicken skewers and
Right.
pita bread
Yeah. Yeah.
and, grapes and figs and dates.
Sure.
Like, we could do that and some
Right.
vegetables.
Yeah.
Um, but we've gotten to see where if we've let our with guidance and with walking through stuff, if we let our kids lead things,
Yeah.
um, the
Yeah.
kids can teach us, and it's not just this top down, but
Right.
the bottom up works
Right.
too. And
Right.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's been neat to see. I'll tell you, I'm so blessed at my current church, and uh, just and my previous church, my first church I ever served, they they love our kids, and our kids made noise. I think,
Right.
man, if I can tell you one thing that will hamper your church's kids ministry and relational family ministry is telling a kid to be quiet in the middle of
Right.
a church service.
Right.
If you tell a kid to be quiet in the middle of church service, the millstone that's going to go around your neck is going to hurt.
Absolutely. Listen, just not say this too. So here's how you can tell you're still a church stuck in the background of how you do ministry and stuff, right? When I'm gonna get real preachy here. When you do the obligatory once a year youth Sunday, right? And it's like, oh, look at our kids, look at our young people, but that's it. That's part of the problem. The other thing is when churches say stuff like, oh, the youth are the church of the future, but we do nothing to equip them to be the church now. Right? And I'm a
Yeah.
firm believer, whatever an adult can do, a young person can do too with adult guidance. They can serve on the AV team. They can grow up to be in the band. You know, you don't have to plug them in. Let them play the guitar. Teach them how to do whatever it is. Look, I had 4-year-olds in my church that fought to take up the offering. Right now, they're like 9 and 10. They still take up the offering. They've done it with adults. They've done it by themselves. They can they can greet. They can. You just got to raise up a child, right? Train up a child in the way he should go when he's old and not depart from it. That's where we've missed the ball. We're
Yeah.
not teaching kids, right? This is all based on Deuteronomy 6 as well, the Shema. And the point being is when you say dumb stuff like
Yeah.
the youth of the church of the future, but you do nothing to prepare them now, you have no future church.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
Well, you can tell why I'm a preacher too now sometimes.
No, me too. Me too.
Yeah,
And no, when we had, I'll be quick, but because we're about time to wrap up, but we have, when we had our round of, uh, special needs kids. So
right.
our first special need foster kid changed the trajectory of this church.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I'll fight with anybody who disagrees with me on that because he changed the trajectory of our church. And he is with Jesus now.
Uh,
And it was the worst day I've ever experienced.
yeah.
Um, and but he changed the heart of this
Yeah.
church. And now when there's kids that show up and they make so much noise, like
Don't you love
it
it?
is so loud. Their monitors beep all the time and the ventilators are constant,
Right.
and the
Yeah.
whole thing. And the first Sunday that they come in, I say, "Welcome to Red Wine."
Right.
We have kids that make a whole lot of noise in this service. And if that's a problem, come on up to the front. You won't be able to hear them as bad.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but they're welcome here
Yeah.
just like anybody else. And we just take it head on. And so I think,
Yeah.
if church, if you're worried, if you're tiptoeing around dealing with kids in the service, and you just tell people, hey, this is what we've come to expect, know, and love.
That's
And
right.
if that's not what you need, this is not a place for you. We love
Right.
you.
Right.
But you
Turn your
probably do need
churches
to read
around.
your Bible again.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but we've really seen such growth in
Yeah.
ourselves and
Yeah.
in our culture by embracing
Yeah.
the non-traditional family and
Yeah.
the fullness of the family of God, that it would be wild to step backwards from
Right.
that, right?
It's
And
funny.
so
Most of us look for the mountaintop experience, even in church. But where is most of our growth experience? It's in the valley. It's in the challenges, right? And then
yeah,
we get respite on the mountaintop. But even at the Mount of Transfiguration, they couldn't stay there, right? They needed to get their hands dirty and do ministry. The next book we're writing actually is going to have a section on special needs. I need to talk to you more about this afterwards because I'd love to
let's
get
talk.
some input.
Yeah,
But yeah, the next book is going to be how do you become an embracive church as family with families with special needs kids, right? And again, look, have affinity groups, have special certain times for them. Just stop making it the norm and so much of it.
yeah, yeah. Well, Dr. Griffith, we love your heart. We love your heart for, the theological perspective of church's family. And I know Clemens Chapel is blessed to have you there. Toccoa Falls University, University of Toccoa Falls, whichever it
Yeah, well, we didn't want
is
to do
blessed to have you
TSU
there.
because that doesn't sound right.
works for
Right.
me.
Exactly.
Yeah. But just grateful for you. Everything that you've plugged in the show, we will put in the show notes so that people can
Perfect.
go straight to it from there. We'll also include a link to your book so that people can go if they are in ministry or just a layperson or a clergy person looking to imagine family and expand that understanding of family, the church as family. So we'll have that in the show notes as well. But thank you so much for your time here
Thank
on
you.
Global Methodist Voices.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
And we thank you for listening to Global Methodist Voices. It's been a blessing to be back with you this week. We hope that you will go check out the resources that are down in the show notes and really begin praying for how has God positioned you and your church to serve as the family of God to those who come and those who are not there, who are not yet a part of it. That family, if you've ever experienced family, if you've ever had a family, it's messy. And so expect a little bit of mess, but I hope that you'll enjoy it and see how God is in the midst of so much mess. Be sure to like and subscribe for future episodes, and we hope that you're having a blessed day as you travel North Georgia or to the very ends of the earth. Go with God.